The Fukushima Daiichi catastrophe. Unsafe at any dose. 6 weeks ago, when people first heard about the reactor damage at the Fukushima Daiichi plant in Japan, many doctors already knew the prognosis. If any of the containment vessels or fuel pools exploded, it would mean millions of new cases of cancer in the northern hemisphere. Many advocates of nuclear power would deny this. During the 25th anniversary last week of the Chernobyl disaster, some commentators asserted that few people died in the aftermath, and that there have been relatively few genetic abnormalities in survivors' offspring. It's an easy leap from there to arguments about the safety of nuclear energy compared to alternatives like coal, and optimistic predictions about the health of the people living near Fukushima. But this is dangerously ill-informed and short-sighted. If anyone knows better, it's doctors. There's great debate about the number of fatalities following Chernobyl. The International Atomic Energy Agency has predicted that there will be only approximately 4,000 deaths from cancer, but a 2009 report published by the New York Academy of Sciences says that almost 1 million people have already perished from cancer and other diseases. The high doses of radiation caused so many miscarriages that we will never know the number of genetically damaged fetuses that did not come to term. And both Belarus and Ukraine have group homes full of deformed children. Nuclear accidents never seem to cease. We're decades, if not generations, away from seeing the full effects of the radioactive emissions from Chernobyl. In other words, it's a cumulative effect. It builds up over time. As we know from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it takes years to get cancer. Leukemia takes only 5 to 10 years to emerge, but solid cancers can take 15 to 60. Furthermore, most radiation-induced mutations are recessive. It can take many generations for 2 recessive genes to combine to form a child with a particular disease, like cystic fibrosis. We can't possibly imagine how many cancers and other diseases will be caused in the far future by the radioactive isotopes emitted by Chernobyl and Fukushima. Doctors do understand these dangers. They work hard to try to save the life of a child dying of leukemia. They work hard to try to save the life of a woman dying of metastatic breast cancer. And yet, the medical dictum says that for incurable diseases, the only recourse is prevention. There's no group better prepared than doctors to stand up to the physicists of the nuclear industry. Still, physicists talk convincingly about permissible doses of radiation. They consistently ignore internal emitters. Radioactive elements from nuclear power plants are weapons tests that are ingested or inhaled into the body, giving very high doses to small volumes of cells. They focus instead on generally less harmful external radiation from sources outside the body, whether from isotopes emitted from nuclear power plants, medical X-rays, cosmic radiation, or background radiation that is naturally present in our environment. However, doctors know that there is no such thing as a safe dose of radiation, and that radiation is cumulative. The mutations caused in cells by this radiation are generally very bad. We all carry several hundred genes for disease. There are now more than 2,600 genetic diseases on record, any one of which may be caused by a radiation-induced mutation, and many of which we're bound to see more of, because we are artificially increasing background levels of radiation. For many years now, physicists employed by the nuclear industry have been outperforming doctors, at least in politics and the news media. Since the Manhattan Project in the 1940s, physicists have had easy access to Congress. They had harnessed the energy inside the center of the sun. And later, physicists, whether lobbying for nuclear weapons or nuclear energy, had the same power. They walk into Congress, and Congress virtually prostrates itself. Their technological advancements are there for all to see. The harm will become apparent only decades later. Doctors, by contrast, have fewer dates with Congress and much less access on nuclear issues. They don't typically go around discussing the latent period of carcinogenesis and the amazing advances made in understanding radiobiology. But as a result, they do an inadequate job of explaining the long-term dangers of radiation to policymakers and the public. So, when patients come to doctors with cancer, they deem it rude to inquire if they lived downwind of 3 Mile Island in the 1980s, or might have eaten Hershey's chocolate made with milk from cows that grazed in irradiated pastures nearby. They tend to treat the disaster after the fact, instead of fighting to stop it from happening in the first place. Doctors need to confront the nuclear industry, because again, the radiation has a cumulative effect. It builds up over time. In conclusion, nuclear power is neither clean nor sustainable, nor an alternative to fossil fuels. In fact, it adds substantially to global warming or climate change. Solar, wind, and geothermal energy, along with conservation, if done right, can meet our energy needs. At the beginning, we had no sense that radiation-induced cancer. Marie Curie and her daughter didn't know that the radioactive materials they handled would kill them. But it didn't take long for the early nuclear physicists in the Manhattan Project to recognize the toxic effects of radioactive elements. They had hoped that peaceful nuclear energy would absolve their guilt over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but it has only extended it. Physicists had the knowledge to begin the nuclear age. Physicians have the knowledge, credibility, and legitimacy to end it. This is another sign of the times, the end times, transition days, which is a continuing day-by-day process. In other words, what kind of world are we leaving to the future generations? And that is one of the most important questions that there is. It's about creating a sustainable future for the children. Revelation chapter 6, verse 5. And when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, Come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. 6. And I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 beasts say, A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. 7. And when he had opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th beast say, Come and see. 8. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him, and power was given unto them over the 4th part of the earth, to kill with weapon, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. 9. And when he had opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God, and for the testimony which they held. 10. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? 11. And white robes were given unto every one of them, and it was said unto them that they should rest yet for a little season, until their fellow servants also, and the brethren that should be killed as they were, should be fulfilled. 12. And I beheld, when he had opened the 6th seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. 13. And the stars of heaven fell into the earth, even as a fig tree casts her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. 14. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island and nation were moved out of their places. 15. And the leaders of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man, hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains. 16. And and said to the mountains and rocks, Fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. 17. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? Also, Revelation chapter 8, verse 10. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of waters. 11. And the name of the star is called Wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many humans died of the waters, because they were made bitter. It's time for all prophecy to be fulfilled, because everything is connected, and everything is numbered.